Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to the continuation of the MCU Rewatch. Once again, this is just me rewatching all the MCU movies so far. So for this one, I rewatched Thor: The Dark World as well as Captain America: The Winter Soldier. So first off, Thor: The Dark World, very good. I feel like this is the first. Well, I think once again, well, not as much as the first movie, but I felt. I guess in retrospect, I didn't remember the movie being so evenly split. I remembered it being heavily on Earth, which I feel like, maybe like 60% of the movie is on Earth and like 40% is like Asgard and obviously like non-Earth. But I feel like this movie kind of split it a little more, probably the other way, probably like, 30% on Earth, 70% kind of other worlds. Because obviously he's trying to keep the peace in the 9 realms because the other 9 realms went a little like haywire because of everything that went down in Thor 1. So, well, combination of Thor 1 plus the events of the Avengers, because I guess it's kind of that same situation of like Avengers put Earth on the map for people to be like, oh, so things are interesting on Earth. So I guess the same thing for Asgard too, because it's like, oh, Asgard's defenses are down, and it just, I guess that just kind of set like, oh, Asgard isn't as powerful as it needs to be. So now, I mean, that's, I don't know if they outright said that's why the 9 realms were kind of chaotic, but I think that's my assumption, just because it's like, oh yeah, Asgard is considered weak after the attack on them and everything, like what Loki kind of inadvertently, what kind of situation he inadvertently created. Obviously, this movie continues like the relationship between Thor and Jane. It's something I think I talked about in the Avengers one a little bit. I remember it then, and I thought it was such a neat thing, was the fact that she was super pissed at him, which we see that in this, where she's kind of like, yeah, like she's been looking all over the place for him since Thor 1, and it's like, oh, you have been back, but I mean, to be fair, it's been like a year or so since, well, I can't remember, time frame wise, it probably hasn't been like a year, it's probably been a couple months. Oh no, it might have been like a year at this point in time, because this was like the last movie in 2013, so it might have been like over a year since she saw him, at least during the events of Avengers. Like before that, like Thor 1, yeah, like I said, because some of the movies kind of keep continuity with the exact years that they come out, so it could have been literally, it's been like 2 years since she physically saw him, so you'd be kind of upset too. It's like, well, he had a good excuse. He's out saving the 9 realms, and he's also, you know, last time he was here wasn't for like a vacation or anything. I mean, he pretty much got to work immediately with the whole s.h.i.e.L.D. invasion situation, dealing with Loki things. Also, there was a line I thought was so interesting, I didn't remember, where it's like Loki was talking about, because Odin was kind of making it seem like, oh, you're trying to rule them, but we're no better than the humans. We're not really gods. Which once again is that situation of the MCU not fully going towards like, oh, you kind of are gods, but you're not they try not to treat themselves like God, try not to put themselves to, which is so interesting considering the fact is Odin kind of does anyway, because later on he refers to Jane almost like a goat, and even she was like, what the heck, did he just call me a goat? Which is like, so what's the difference there? It's kind of like Loki trying to rule over them, but you're like, oh, we're no better, but then you still treat humans like crap. It's just kind of interesting. But the fact is, even Loki was kind of joking, well, not really joking, but being like, oh yeah, we're just like humans, give or take 5,000 years or so, right? I think I'd also completely forgotten about Jane being possessed by the ether and everything like that too, that being the storyline. It's kind of sad, like her first time going to Asgard weren't under great circumstances, just kind of sad circumstances in fact. This is also the first movie where you get to really kind of see the fact is that Sith kind of might potentially have a thing for Thor. At least it's kind of like heavily, I feel like it's hinting at it a lot more heavily in this one, because even Odin's like, oh, stop wasting your time looking at humans when you should look at what's right in front of your eyes, and it hard cuts to like a camera shot of Sith and stuff like that, and it's like you could tell she has feelings for Thor, but it's like a situation of, I don't know, maybe she never felt like really telling him how she felt. It's actually kind of interesting too, because it's like, I mean, it's kind of sad too, because this is the last time we get to see any of the Earth characters, the Earth storyline to Thor, because when Ragnarok happens, he's only on Earth for like a couple scenes, and then it's like never back to Earth throughout the entire movie. So so a lot of these storylines, you never get to see them continue. You never get to see Darcy or where her and intern Ian are at. I love that whole situation. I thought it was pretty neat, because they're like, the gravity and stuff is messed up from all the occurrences, and like he lifts up the car and protects her and like slams it down, and then like they're popping all over the place, and then Jane's like, Darcy? And he's like, Jane! And she's out there making out with Ian. Also, though, the fact is Eric is literally not in a lot of the movie. He is, but it's because he went a little crazy, which is like, oh, I guess I can understand, like, you had a god in your head. But it's like, yeah, Hawkeye never had any issues with that. He went to work pretty much immediately. But I guess at the same time, it's just kind of like, I guess the explanation for that could that be for that because, like, Hawkeye's been through enough training. He's like a well-trained person, so getting mind controlled isn't an issue, which is funny because that comes up again, you know, obviously in Age of Ultron, but we'll get to that when I get to it. But so I guess it had less of an effect and an impact on him, or maybe it's because, you know, Black Widow kind of like slowly waned him off the mind control, whereas Eric was kind of more so like all at once, so there'll probably make maybe some residual effects to it. Nevertheless, pretty dope. I like that. I mean, sadly they can't all do it anymore, but I thought it was kind of a dope thing about the Dark Elves kind of like taking those things and then like turning into those hulking monsters like the one dude does in the movie. I was like, oh man. Also, they had those dope grenades, which are like black holes. You throw them and just like, people get sucked in and just like poof. It kind of like makes you like collapse and combust on yourself. It's like, wow, those are some crazy grenades. Also kind of a, you know, obviously this is like the sad moment for Loki, because like, well, Loki and Thor, like their mom dies in this movie, you know, which I remember that, but it's like, it's sad because Loki never got to see his mom at the very end. And then once again, you can make the argument like he kind of actually played a role in killing his own mom because he told the dude exactly where to go, so he made it easier for them. I mean, who's to say they wouldn't have got to her, his mom eventually anyway, just because the fact of the matter is she was guarding Jane and everything, and they were after Jane. She was the target in the first place, but still, I think he helped a little bit. Maybe that's what pissed him off even more. I like that whole illusion thing of him making it seem like he's calm, cool, and collected, but Thor's like, yeah, I know what's going on, brother, and the illusion drops and just the room's like furniture and stuff is broken and he's kind of tattered and just a little, just, you know, disheveled and stuff like that. Because no matter what the circumstances may be, because that was still his mom, because I guess in his mind she showed him much more kindness. She was less, because in his dad's eyes he could only see himself as just a puzzle piece. Because even Odin kind of said a dickish thing where it's like, if it wasn't for me, you wouldn't even be right here to hate me. You know, you would have just been left where you were in the Frost Giants land, which is kind of like shitty to say, but he said what he said. But like I said, like, I don't know. We don't 100% know what Loki and his mom's relationship was like. I mean, I guess like she treated, like, you know, Thor was always Odin's favorite, assumably, and it's just kind of like, well, it's kind of implied. And then I guess his mother always treated him equally, so I guess that was kind of the whole situation. But nevertheless, there's the great scene of like Loki messing around, being like, oh, here I am disguised as a guard. Oh, here I am still as myself, but you're disguised as Sif, having Thor's voice coming out, which is weird. And then it's like, oh, look at me, I'm Captain America. It's like, oh, it's nice, but I mean, the costume's so tight, and just like, oh, justice and all that is right. But obviously, probably easily one of my favorite parts is the whole climactic battle at the end, where it's just kind of like popping in and out, like sending them places, like, you know, the occurrences, like kind of like portals are kind of everywhere, which I think is such a neat aspect, especially the Mjolnir stuff, where it's just kind of like Mjolnir goes like trying to find Thor, and so it misses because they go through a portal and it's just going straight into space and stuff like that. I thought that was so beautifully done and executed. It was amazing. Like, I love that being a part of the fight, just popping in and out of dimensions, cars coming with them, obviously gravity being wonky everywhere. Even at one point when Thor has to just stop and is like, okay, I gotta take the train, and that lady's beside him and just kind of bumps into him a little bit. She's like, oh, sorry, and he's just kind of like, I was like, what? This is happening. I was like, that's so good. I thought Jane probably would have gotten more chances to use the ether. I mean, I guess it's like, I guess I thought she was going to have like her Pepper moment, where Pepper kind of went like all super like she did at the end of Iron Man 3. I thought something like that, but it's like, no, Jane never had opportunity to use it. I guess it's not something a human could easily use. Obviously, this ends with Loki disguising himself as Odin, and no one really knows. Because the thing is, like, I guess afterwards, Thor protected, he's on Earth like for the rest of the time, like in between like now and obviously Age of Ultron, you know, like I think he stays on Earth, and even then, like, he doesn't go back to Asgard until like Ragnarok, because he's all protecting the other 9 realms after like what he sees in Age of Ultron. Once again, we'll get to that when we get to it. 4-ish years he never goes back to Asgard, hence why Loki was able to kind of continue fooling everyone. I mean, there's no one to kind of oppose him, which in retrospect, it kind of makes you almost feel like, man, I guess he like, doesn't really give that much of a, you know, because the moment he got an opportunity, he came back. But I guess he did a good enough job where it's like, no one really noticed, so it wasn't that big of a deal. Like, nothing, he never did anything too crazy, so it's just kind of sad that he switched and no one noticed. I guess more so because Thor wasn't there to really call him out, and it's Odin, so who's going to say anything to Odin, like, oh, you're not, you know. So it's kind of sad because this is the last time we see a lot of these characters, because none of them pop up again in Ragnarok. I mean, it could be a situation that they were all other parts of the Nine Realms themselves. Could potentially have been off-screen killed, because I know like Natalie Portman didn't come back because it was kind of like a conflict of like schedules and stuff like that, so that's why they just make it so that Jane and him broke up. I mean, to be fair, they kind of did the same thing with Tony and Pepper, so who's to say like in the future that potentially won't turn into something else, like she won't pop back up in the story or something like that. But like I said, talk about that more when we get to like Ragnarok. But one thing I would like to know I'd forgotten about entirely was the fact is that Sith and the other dude actually go to the Collector and drop off an Infinity Stone. I'm like, wait, what? Because they're like, yeah, we have the Tesseract. The last thing we need is another like Infinity Stone there too. And I'm like, well, that kind of makes sense because literally in the past 2 movies, Asgard hasn't been as safe as it normally has been because it's been invaded twice. So it's kind of like the perfect time to like, yeah, we need to move him. And then he ends up getting one, which I didn't remember at all because he's like, the Collector goes, oh, 1 down, 5 to go, which is like, huh, you had an Infinity Stone? When did that? Because I remember, see, that's like the entire thing about Guardians is the Infinity Stone. It's like, I didn't remember him having another one. Was that, I guess was it there the entire time? Does it come up that he has one? I don't remember at all. So technically he had 2, maybe he references it. I've seen the movie twice and I just don't remember that context at all, like them bringing up him having the second Infinity Stone. Well, I mean, because they're bringing they have another Infinity Stone with them. That's the whole point in the movie, so... Either way, I just thought that was kind of an interesting scene. Also, another interesting thing about the Thor thing, which I think is interesting, this is also around the time of Agents of S.h.i.e.L.D. too. Like, I'm sure like all this and Winter Soldier took place kind of like production-wise, kind of around the time potentially as Agents of S.h.i.E.L.D. But nevertheless, this is that first movie that kind of like Agents of S.h.i.e.L.D. reference, because I think it's like episode 9 in season 1. They literally show up in the aftermath of the events of the Thor Dark World. There's actually even an Asgardian that they kind of get first introduced to, known as the Berserker. It's kind of part of the storyline, which I think is such a fascinating thing. Because obviously, like, no one knows, but that whole situation with Coulson and S.h.i.E.L.D. is happening secretly behind the scenes, which is interesting, especially when obviously moving into Winter Soldier. We'll talk about that. Yeah, like, it was said back then, like, I remember hearing someone say this when the movie originally came out, and I think it still holds true. Winter Soldier is just an amazing action movie. I feel like even if you're not really into superhero movies, I feel like you can just dig, like, I think this is like the best action movie in my opinion, because it's just kind of, because I remember like it's just so good. The action sequences and stuff like that are fantastic. It is, I like, obviously the whole theme of the movie is just kind of like, oh yeah, Hydra's actually been underneath your nose the entire time. It's actually kind of interesting because Malik doesn't actually pop up in this movie. I thought he did, because like I said, I brought this up during Avengers because I know he's actually Hydra, but it's like he never actually pops up in the movie. The dude, God, what's his face? Pierce, you know, Fury's friend is one. Obviously, this is our introduction to Sam, aka Falcon, which he doesn't suit up to the end of the movie, but still, it's pretty neat. Probably one of my favorite scenes is probably like the elevator scene where it's just like Steve is stuck in the elevator and he's looking around and he's starting to piece it together. Like, okay, he's like, okay, so before we get this started, does anyone want to get off it? Like, get off the elevator? And it's just kind of like this, like, close quarters, like, super action. I thought that was pretty neat. And they're trying to handcuff him with like these magnetic cuffs, but he's too strong and he's fighting the magnetism. I was like, that's so dope. It's kind of sad too because he doesn't get to wear his like new like Captain America suit all the time. There's also that scene of him just like at the beginning running through the ship, like knocking people down and out of the way, which is pretty badass. I also like the fact is that this is a movie where it's like him and S.h.i.E.L.D. not really getting along because he doesn't like the way Fury runs things. It's like, oh, like obviously Natasha had this whole other mission that I was unaware of, which is like, if she has that mission, sure, okay, fine, but let me know ahead of time. I mean, the whole point was kind of building trust between him and Natasha, was I think it's kind of a nice subplot of this movie. And I guess because it fits very nicely considering the fact that she is kind of the spy and everything, so she never really gets close to people. This is kind of like our first time of seeing her really do that. They almost have like this whole like old road trip situation, kind of trying to figure everything out. I mean, it's not really like a big focus in the movie, but when they go to try and track down a signal that leads them to that scientist that was working with Red Skull. And then obviously any scene with Bucky, him and Cap going at it, which is like crazy. The way it was interesting too, because they said a line where it basically seems like it's implying the reason why Bucky was able to potentially survive the fall is because that said scientist dude was already experimenting on Bucky even back then. Obviously they pushed it even further after they got Bucky fully. It's like, oh, he survived and everything. They gave him the metallic arm because he lost his arm. Plus, like, I guess they felt like, oh, this is opportune. Which is like, I wonder at what point in time did he get Bucky? Because, I mean, I guess this was before they really captured him. I guess this was before that because that scientist had to have gotten away at some point. Well, because I felt like, you know, the government would have kept an eye on him, because the last time we saw him, they had him. Like, Tommy Lee Jones was like the last person to talk to him in the first Captain America movie. So I guess he at some point in time like snuck away and got Bucky and was experimenting on him secretly the entire time. I mean, to be fair, he also had Bucky like cryogenically frozen, so it's kind of like, I guess that's another way to kind of keep it secret what you were up to. Also, there's this line in the movie I thought was so interesting where it's kind of like, oh yeah, like Hydra wants to wipe out people like you and Banner and Stephen Strange. I was like, wait a minute. Like, did you say Stephen Strange? Because I can never remember Doctor Strange's real name because I always refer to him as Doctor Strange. Looked it up, his name's like Stephen Vincent Strange. Or is it, yes, Stephen Vincent Strange. And I was like, wait a minute, this was back in 2014. Was technically Doctor Strange set up even that far back? Because to be fair, like when it comes to Doctor Strange's timeline, it is kind of all over the place in certain aspects of the movie. So I mean, I don't remember them ever expressly saying, I think in my mind, I assumed it took place in 2016, but for S.H.I.E.L.D. to know about him and even care about him must mean, and for him to be a danger or something like that, it seems like he was already Doctor Strange even back then, but maybe the argument could be that was supposed to be a throwaway line. I don't know. Because when you think about, if that is the case, because it's interesting, because like, let's not forget, like the last scene, kind of going back to Ragnarok, I do apologize, but like the last scene of Doctor Strange is him talking to Thor. That same scene is in Ragnarok, but you know, which Ragnarok happens in 2017. Like obviously the way Thor talks about like, oh, we haven't seen each other since 2015 because it's been 2 years since like the events of Age of Ultron, you know, when he met up with Hulk/Banner. So it could be like Doctor Strange's timeline is kind of all over the place potentially within that movie. We just never really realized that. But I was like, wait, what? That seemed like that was so interesting to me, that because that implies that he was set up even back then. Like I said, it could have easily been a throwaway line, but I feel like there are no accidents in that situation. It's like, yeah, when you reference something like that, it's because they already had it planned out that there was going to be a Doctor Strange in the future anyway, so I guess that's why they're able to do it. So it is kind of interesting in the long run, and I guess that says a lot about Fury, that when the time came, the only person he could trust was Rogers, like, because he didn't know who else was Hydra, which is interesting and funny just because obviously there's that whole thing that blew up, like, was that like a year or two ago, the whole like, oh, Captain America being like Hail Hydra. Like it's just kind of interesting now in retrospect, rewatching this movie. But it's like that's the only person he could trust. He didn't know who else to trust, which is interesting because there were so many people that were in the know but not Black Widow. It's like you could tell it hurt her not be. It's like, dude, I'm one of your top people. Like, we're supposed to be in this together and you didn't tell me what you were up to. You made me think you were dead. Which I feel like that's something that's never really explored in the movies, is Black Widow and Nick Fury's like relationship, because it hurt her to see him die. I guess because like he gave her a new life and new purpose and everything. So I guess that's why she kind of holds him very dear. Because the only person that knew had to be Kobe Smolder's character, which is interesting because once again kind of talking about the tie-ins to S.H.I.E.L.D., which on many different levels. For one, it's the fact is that she's one of the people that Liza Coulson and stuff is like, yeah, Fury's dead, even though you know damn well that he's still alive. Which is also interesting because you see everyone go to different places. Like at the end, she goes to start working at Stark Industry. I wonder, is that on purpose or not? Because it's supposed to be like S.H.I.E.L.D. being dissolved and stuff like that. because it's interesting, because a lot of people, you know, obviously with the exception of certain things, people are like, oh yeah, this is like in the MCU, it's like, oh, this is the last time we get to see Fury, but it's like technically not, because in the MCU, like, technically it has to be Agents of S.h.i.e.L.D. because he pops up in like one episode at the end of the season, like the season 1 finale potentially, or maybe it was like second to last episode and the last episode of season 1. I don't remember. He definitely pops up at the end of the season, and that's the only times he pops up in the show. But it's kind of interesting because I think, because obviously this is before like the movies and TV shows kind of heavily separate. They don't, like, obviously like Agents of S.h.i.e.L.D. kind of severely becomes its own thing, you know, because S.h.i.e.L.D. is supposed to be dissolved, because in Captain America's mind it's like, no, we can't keep S.h.i.e.L.D. around because it's too infected with Hydra. It's like they're too one and the same, so it's like we need to dissolve, because that's why even Fury leaves. But I guess the argument could be made like during Agents of S.h.i.e.L.D., like that's right before the very end of the movie where he burns everything, he's in casual clothes and stuff like that, before he passes the mantle on to Coulson, is the argument that could be made. And I guess that's kind of the whole thing, like S.h.i.e.L.D. is very covert, you know, through most of the series. It's not the public figure that it is. So I guess that's why like Fury was like, no, we can't let S.h.i.e.L.D. completely die, so that's why he passes the reins on to Coulson and stuff. Yes, that's, you know, I mean, the argument could be made that's like making a contrivance out of something. Like, I mean, you don't have to really go through that much effort to like connect it, but I feel like that could be the legitimate like reasoning why like S.h.i.E.L.D., like I said, this is supposed to be the end of S.h.i.E.L.D., and I completely forgot that like Captain America was all about that. I mean, because they're technically not S.h.i.E.L.D. going forward, because it's just the Avengers working to make stuff happen. They're kind of on their own, hence why I guess Civil War happens, where it's like they're not regulated. I mean, I guess the argument can be made, I mean, I guess at least S.h.i.E.L.D. was a government organization. They might do some shady stuff, but at least they were regulated by the government, so I guess that was kind of the argument. But like the Avengers kind of like, nah, you're kind of on your own, you're just super powered people who are stronger and that no one else can really deal with. You're just out there doing your own thing. Also didn't remember that this movie, I mean, I guess this is kind of like heavily leading into Age of Ultron, was the fact is Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch are set up at the end. Like they're the post credit scene, which I thought was kind of fascinating. Because the next movie is Guardians of the Galaxy, but obviously like the real push going forward was like, you know, obviously Age of Ultron. This is also like, oh yeah, this is also like our first time seeing the whole Peggy Carter situation in this movie too. That's very sad, because it's just looking at her like that, just, I mean, it's like, yeah, she's had this great life, but it's, you know, it's sad because it's like, you know, and it's like, he's like, oh, like, you know, like obviously she's older and her mind's not 100% there, and it's just, I don't know, she's like, oh, like at first she, like, you know, she kind of has like a dementia thing going on, because she's like, oh, Steve, oh, you're back, and he's like, of course, I had to come back to see my best, you know, my gal, you know, and it's just kind of like, it's sad, because it's just a reminder of the life that there's no going back for any of them, you know, and that's kind of like something that him and Sam kind of bond about, the whole, like, I mean, they both were in a situation where they lost, like, their partners on the battlefields and stuff like that, which is kind of interesting, because, like, during the whole helicarrier situation, I forgot there was like the whole 3 helicarrier things that was kind of like the whole plan. I completely forgot about that. But when it came down to like Steve falling, like I thought, like in my mind, I was thinking of, I guess, of the first movie where it was him grabbing onto Bucky, trying to hold on to Bucky, and it ends up like stuff happening and he ends up letting go. I thought that was it. I completely forgot, like, oh, Steve's the one that fell. Bucky went in and saved him, because there was a part of him that remembered, because like Steve was like, I'm not gonna fight you anymore, Bucky. Yeah, especially after Bucky already shot you like 3 times, like, which sucked. But it is kind of interesting, because obviously this does set up even Civil War stuff, because Latasha says this line of like, yeah, be careful, because like you don't want to like pull too many strings, like, you know, because basically looking into Bucky is going to involve opening a lot of wounds from the past and stuff like that, which is so interesting, because that plays a big part in especially like the final act of Civil War in certain regards. They even hint to it in this movie, where it being like, oh yeah, like Howard Stark dying wasn't an accident, that was kind of a Hydra hit, you know, even in this movie. Also, there's the actress from, and it bothers the crap out of me, I don't remember her name, it's the actress from the ABC show Revenge, the lead actress. Obviously she's kind of his neighbor, but she's actually secretly an agent and stuff like that. Obviously this isn't her only time she'll pop up later on, but I wonder if they're going to do anything more with that character or not. I'm surprised they never did anything where they put her in S.h.i.E.L.D., but I guess it's more so like, well, to be fair, she probably is under the impression S.h.i.E.L.D's done too, because she joins the CIA at the end of the movie, so she was one of the few people to question like, oh, why are we hunting down Captain America? He's literally an American hero, so why are we hunting him down? and then obviously Pierce is giving that light and all that stuff. So I also don't remember them. I guess it's something that happens off screen, the whole Natasha dealing with her respective situation, like all her, because like I said, it's like hard cut to like the events of Age of Ultron, because there's no like setup for that, like them coming back together again. Not that I remember there being, maybe because like even when the movie begins they're already working together. There was no, I guess it was kind of like you didn't really need one after the Avengers, but as especially Natasha's situation, like all of S.h.i.e.L.D.'s secrets are out there in the open and stuff like that, especially her, so she kind of had to deal with that. But I don't, maybe there's some lines in Age of Ultron where she deals with that. I don't remember. Like I said, you don't remember exactly. I mean, I guess because S.h.i.e.L.D. is out of the way and, you know, some stuff goes down and it's like, oh, we gotta help. Like I said, I don't remember how that all came together. Like I said, maybe they'll talk about it more in Age of Ultron, but it's just kind of interesting them coming together because it seemed like there was no real setup to it, you know? So I don't know. Guardians of the Galaxy is next. Very excited to kind of rewatch that. Like I said, this is going to be the third time of me watching this movie. But really, that's all I want to talk about in this video. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good